finish off with rights lesson?
We finished off with civil rights last time, and today we are picking up skill in culture and society. But a couple of last aspects of culture and society. So today we'll focus on finishing up that aspect and then also talking about some different doctrinal developments in the 20th century. And then Thursday we'll finish up the 20th century, so we'll just have the contemporary period for the Tuesday that we can come back after Thanksgiving. I want to mention three kind of remaining areas in the 20th century where Christianity is interacting with culture in a variety of ways, and one of those is the issue of pluralism. In many respects, the United States has never been totally a Christian nation. And one of the things that we could have traced and talked about is the founding of the United States. Was it a Christian founding? Were the founders Orthodox Christians? And some other things related to that. But one of the things that's important for us to recognize is that even during the colonial period, and from that time on, there have been religions other than Christianity present on the North American continent. And that's not even including, certainly Native American religions, cultural lifeways, whatever we want to call them, were in existence and were present prior to the colonial period. But in thinking about just the presence of colonists in the United States, there were Jews and Muslims even from the colonial period, and even a few others as well. The other thing to recognize, of course, in addition to that, is that there's been a lot of diversity in Christianity, even in the colonial period. There were Catholics, there were Protestants, and of course there were a variety of different types of Protestants. So there was a lot of diversity. And one of the questions that has always been a part of that interaction with diversity is, how do you relate to people that have different faiths than you do, whether that's a different Christian group or a non-Christian group. And certainly as we think about the transitions through the late 19th century into the 20th century, that diversity increased as more and more Catholics, Orthodox Christians, additional Protestant groups, Muslims, Jews, other nationalities, other religions, immigrated to the United States. And so gradually, throughout the latter part of the 19th century, that diversity increased. But in the 20th century, a lot of Protestants became very concerned about this increase in diversity. Because although the First Amendment, in the words of Thomas Jefferson, erected a wall of separation between church and state, Protestants, since the founding of the United States, have had a lot of cultural and political power, have been able to shape legislation, have been able to shape the morality of the nation, or at least enforce a morality on the nation. And with the increase of people from non-Protestant faiths, there was a concern by many Protestants that power would be lost, that their perceived notions of what the United States was meant to be would be changed. And so there were several different cultural acts that Protestants engaged in. We talked about anti-Catholicism, but then there were also political acts that were shaped by these concerns as well. In 1924, Congress passed the National Origins and Integration Act, also known as the Johnson-Reed Act, after the two individuals that put forth the legislation. Essentially, the Johnson-Reed Act established quotas on immigrants based on where they were coming from. And so the number of immigrants was controlled. Now, the quotas were based on the population makeup of the United States in 1890. So they looked at the 1890 census, and said, okay, so many percent of citizens of the United States come from Great Britain. Right? So many percent of the people from the United States come from Germany. Right? So many of the United States, etc., from these different places. And so based on that population makeup, that was then transferred into quotas, to which it was kind of like set up as, we will accept these many people from Great Britain. We'll accept this many people from Germany. We'll accept this many people from China or Japan. Well, certainly, if you think about the cultural makeup, the ethnic makeup of the United States in 1890, you're going to have a lot of people out from Great Britain, a lot of people from Germany, but places like Eastern Europe, Asia, are going to have much smaller quotas because in 1890 there weren't that many people from those regions in the United States. So that limited a lot of the immigration that could take place of non-Protestant groups. Now, part of that had a very sad side effect in that a lot of Jews that could have escaped the Holocaust, for example, were not able to immigrate to the United States because of quotas. And so they were kind of stuck where they were. Some did make it to the United States, some did make it to Great Britain, but certainly more could have been allowed in and spared. Eventually, Congress did away with that legislative act in 1965 with the Hart-Celler Act, which essentially did away with the quotas. With the disposal of the quota system, people flooded to the United States from these regions that had previously been very limited. So a lot of people came from Asia. And so there was an influx of Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, people from traditional Asian faith, traditional Chinese religion or Shinto or some other things like that, which led Christians into contact with Eastern religions and Islam in greater numbers than before. With this influx of Eastern religions, Christians were now faced with the question of, what do we do about these interactions? How do we respond to these people? There were many in the United States, even among Christians, who were interested that perhaps people from these Eastern religions could provide some sort of religious or spiritual insight. And so there was an interest in meditation, in Zen Buddhism, in Eastern notions of the illusions of reality, things like yoga, right? All of which are Eastern practices often connected with religious systems. Now, often many of the people turn to these things, especially in the 1960s and 70s, without really becoming Buddhist or becoming Hindu. And so yoga, as it's practiced in the West, is stripped predominantly of its Hindu notions. And so there was often a lot of co-opting of certain religious practices, and of course then consumerizing it as well. So you're taking this religious practice and you're selling it as an exercise take. But then there was also, for a lot of people, this kind of intermingling of these traditions. So someone might be, might claim to be a Lutheran, for example, but they might also practice Zen meditation. Right? So they're practicing Buddhist practices. And actually, I drove past a Lutheran church when I was preaching on Long Island. I was actually not preaching while I was driving. It sounded like that offered Zen meditation classes. Right? It's a Lutheran church, but it's got Zen classes. Right? So there's this kind of co-opting of these practices, this amalgamation that went on for other people. Others, however, did convert. They dropped a Christian identity or some other identity, became Hindu or Buddhist, or at least the westernized version of these traditions. So when you think about that type of pluralism, right, this increase in diversity, Would you say that this has been a positive development for the United States or a negative development for the United States? Is diversity, is pluralism positive?
Depends on what your social agenda is.
Okay, say a little bit more about that, Jacob. Explain it a little bit more. You can't just say depends.
I know. Depending on what you want in society, whether you want Christianity to be at the height of political power also, or if you just kind of wanted to be a part of society in general, kind of the backdrop of society, to wherever the separation of church and state, right? But if you let Islam in and you let Hinduism in and Buddhism and all that, then Christianity is going to take a hit just because there are people going to be converting over there just for their sheer presence and influence. So if you think that diversity is where America should be, then yeah, it's impactful and it's in your way positive. But if you think, Christianity is obviously going to take a hit, so if you take that as your positive, then it's going to be a negative effect.
Okay.
I think.
Well, Christian may not be.
Yeah,
you can look at diversity as a way to share your faith. It opens you up to more cultures, which will open you up to more people groups. That can be used as a way to share your Christianity with other people. I think a lot of times we think it as like we're on the deep end. These other people are coming in and sharing their ideas, but we have the same ability to share our ideas.
Okay. Okay.
I think, obviously, from a Christian standpoint perspective, having diversity of religion or denomination or whatever is not good because we want people to know the gospel. And so, from just a completely vague yes or no answer, no, it's not good. However, from a more political perspective, because it's a result of freedom of religion, and since Christianity is already the biggest religion anyway, then maybe allowing freedom of religion and that diversity to do this thing would still cause Christianity to thrive and rise even further up because it's already bigger anyway. And so instead of cutting off these things, we're only going to Christianity and anyone else has to leave or whatever. Let them just do their thing, allowing them a place in, if you will, just to kind of go ahead and kind of do language. But just kind of do their thing and do it in peace, and we're able to do ours in peace. But and there's just kind of small, it may not grow and thrive as much as ours would because it's an opportunity to go influence it.
Okay. Kind of got lost in the playpen analogy, but all right.
Well, just like that, just a free area. Okay, do your thing here.
Talking
forward.
Bottle right.
Oh man. The church are getting that class?
Yeah, jar of jelly beans.
Jar of jelly beans.
Was that your Christianity?
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness.
That was a
Similar question. I'm glad I didn't come up with that answer.
Yeah. Still trying to figure that out, how that works.
We're just taking preschool play.
I was trying to make how small parts make up the whole.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said jelly. I'm sorry.
In some respects, I think there are aspects here of all of that are true. That a lot of how you view pluralism, how you view diversity, is also reflective of what you think the United States should be, and what you think the Christian mission should be. Right? That mindset of, do I have a fortress mentality of I'm constantly in struggle with other ideologies, other worldviews, or do I think that there should be a marketplace of ideas where the opportunity for us to speak as a worldview, the opportunity to persuade, to convince. But Of course, one of the things that we also see is in our current situation. With the things that have happened in Paris over the weekend, which hopefully you're not ignorant totally of. Everybody know what I'm talking about with Paris? Okay, all right. One of the things that has come up is the concern about the Syrian refugees that have gone into these other countries in Europe, and with them have come some individuals pretending to be Syrian refugees who are believed to be the perpetrators. This is how those people got into France, was by pretending to be part of the Syrian refugees, and so they snuck in. And now there's this great reaction in the United States because the president said, we'll open our borders to 10,000 refugees from Syria. And so, with respect to Paris, I forget what the number was. I want to say like almost half of the governors of the United States have weighed in and said we're not going to take any refugees. We're closing the borders of our state to Syrian refugees, and there's only probably about a handful of states who have said we will keep our borders open. Places like Pennsylvania, California, and then there's the other set of states, probably about 20 or so, that haven't said one way or the other. But if you look at the map, right, across the South, right, it's the South that is, lockstep, none of them, right, from like Tennessee down, and then over to Texas. So what do we do with something like that, right? Because we have those concerns of national security, those concerns of terrorism, conjoined with this question of whether pluralism is a good thing or not. And so there's a lot of issues where we're facing now that are based on things that we're seeing in previous generations. Plus the struggle between Islam, this radical Islam, and Western ideology dates back to the Crusades, right? There's a lot of things that happened in the Crusades that are still kind of influencing a lot of our interactions now.